Welcome to the Gsmc Business News Podcast, the show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you informed and ahead of the game in business, the Gsmc Business News Podcast has you covered.
Hello, and welcome to the Gsmc Business News Podcast, brought to you by the Gsmc Podcast Network. I am your host, Paula DuPont, and today's show, can I first say that it's May? Yay! Yay! It's now May, which means we're in the second month of the second quarter of this lovely year, 2020. And I only mean that half sarcastically, by the way. There's always good things going on at the same time as not so great things. But today we're going to talk about the latest in the economy, some numbers that came out. And we're also going to talk about the latest developments in terms of the cure for coronavirus. And we're going to talk about Microsoft, Facebook, Tesla, AMC, probably a couple other things in there. But lots of updates to share, so please stick with me today for the show, and we'll get started in just a moment. Okay, well, there's probably not a better place to start than to talk about the overall health of the economy. And one of the best indicators of the economy is the gross domestic product. And it was just released recently that it actually went down by 4.8% in the first 3 months of 2020. Now, this is the biggest decline in a quarterly measure since 2008. And it's expected that it probably will be even worse for the second quarter, which, as I said at the outset, we're a month in to the second quarter. The GDP, as I said, is the broadest. It's the biggest measure of goods and services produced across the economy. And this does not look too great. And in fact, when you have two successive quarters or consecutive quarters of a decline in the GDP, that's usually what would define a recession. And I'm sure no one's surprised to hear that may be what these factors indicate. However, a lot of economists are saying that they do expect us to rebound in the second half of the year. So I think everyone's been expecting that the GDP would be affected, and it has. And until we get our footing on this COVID, we're likely to see a little more damage. Just to give a perspective of what kinds of factors go into the GDP, one of the biggest ones, the reasons why it dropped, is consumer spending is down. We see also that business investment's down. Change in inventories is another reason that it's down. And there were only modest gains in terms of government spending, as in like 0.1 point. Residential investment, 0.7. Trade, 1.3. So pretty modest, can't really make up for the lack of spending, consumer spending. And naturally, we expect to see that kind of reaction when so many are out of work. Incidentally, that was another sad report that came out, was this week's jobs report, where another 3.8 million filed for unemployment last week, bringing the overall total for the past 6 weeks, aligning with the outbreak of COVID, brings it up to about 30 million people that are out of work. So some grim statistics there. And, it's not surprising that we would see such a drop in spending. Now, separately from when these latest numbers about the GDP were released, the Federal Reserve had issued a message that it was going to offer the full range of tools to support the U.S. economy in this challenging time. And it's believed that that message that came out on Wednesday is what buoyed the stock market, which is like a whole other thing to consider. It seems that when you have, jobs report coming out or the unemployment report coming out, you have the GDP showing a miserable first quarter, but then you have the stocks going up, and that's actually thought to be the result of both the confidence expressed by the Federal Reserve about helping in the economy, which it already has in terms of lowering the interest rate, and I think they've committed to keeping it low, and then also providing other support for loans and through the help with the stimulus package. But the other factor that is believed to contribute to the stock market doing well on at close on Wednesday, and I believe actually Thursday as well, what is the fact that we're getting closer to finding treatments that may really work. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in another segment. But I did want to talk about another kind of contradictory message that I've seen, an article that I saw that talked about those consumers who are spending and what they're spending it on. 58 million Americans have been spending more money than usual, and that's according to the survey done by the website Wallet Hub. They have been spending more money, and it is a figure that still represents a minority of the 329 million United States citizens, the population. 43% of Americans were quote-unquote comfort buying or spending more money on items generally considered unnecessary, such as entertainment and booze. Well, that could be argued as to how unnecessary they are. And note the term unnecessary as opposed to non-essential, because as we've discussed in previous podcasts, when it has come to closures at the state level, many states have still, of course, considered alcohol to be an essential. Anyway, I digress. But Wallet Hub had done this survey of about 450 people across all different demographics and age and income levels and all that. They found that the most popular items that were purchased were related to entertainment at about 29%. The next most purchased items were alcohol, 23%, clothing, 15%, beauty products, 13%, electronics, 12%, toys, 5%, and fitness equipment, 3%. Must be all those Mirror and Peloton ads getting to people. The most common price range for shopping during quarantine was $51 to $150. Now, the Americans that are doing this comfort spending, of course, as we said, is a smaller percentage of the overall American population. Where we see the GDP reflected is in the fact that most Americans have been spending less, and that 43% of U.S. adults reported losing their job or earning less money or having someone in their household in that situation. And sadly, 23% of those who have no income or reduced income say that they have enough funds to last 3 months. That, by the way, is according to a different survey, and this one was done by Pew Research Center. So, not a great picture. It's good that there are some that are spending out there. However, hopefully we'll all be out there spending soon when the stay-at-home orders are lifted or eased. Well, that brings us to our first commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the race for the cure.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the Gsmc Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the Gsmc Financial News Podcast.
Hi, we're back. And as I mentioned earlier when I talked about the GDP and its decline in the first quarter of this year, and I mentioned that the very day that was announced, the market actually finished higher, which seems counterintuitive, particularly when you're talking about the GDP being based on largely on consumer spending, or in this case, the lack of it. It's really not that much of a surprise the way things have been going during this stay-at-home time, that the market has been sometimes not seeing some of the same signals or reading them differently. And there are those that say it's because of the message that came from the Federal Reserve saying that they were going to continue to keep the interest rate low and provide tools to help the economy, but also because it seems that this race for a cure or a vaccine seems to trump everything. And there's, people are looking to get excited about the future and about the end of this disease, or at least getting it more under control and on its way out. And so it seems almost every day there's a new headline about another company that is rapidly moving towards approval or, going into final stages of testing for a vaccine or a treatment. Now, one of the things that it's believed that the market responded to on Wednesday of this week, April 29th, where the S&P 500 rose 76.12 points, and it had surged in April overall 13.7%. So, as I said, the market seems to be optimistic, and on that same day, it came out that Gilead Sciences, a pharmaceutical company, is moving forward with a drug called remdesivir. I'm probably not saying that right. Remdesivir. And this drug, it's actually not a new drug. It's a drug that's been around for a while and is being repurposed to treat those with severe cases of coronavirus. And this drug, by the way, has been used in the past to treat Ebola. And so it has been effective in the past. They've been testing it to see how it will respond in patients who have COVID. And it does appear to have some positive effects, positive outcomes. It's still so early for a lot of drugs that are being considered either as vaccines or as treatment courses. This one in particular, the Gilead drug, is one that even President Trump is pushing for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to grant an emergency use authorization for the drug. In other words, this is kind of a fast track process that would enable it to be used more widely and sooner than the typical authorization that the FDA would issue. And according to an article in the Wall Street Journal, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases said on Wednesday that hospitalized COVID-19 patients taking remdesivir in the Institute's study had a speedier recovery than patients taking a placebo. I believe it's saying that for those who took the placebo, it was 15 days until they were cured, and with remdesivir trial, it took 11 days for recovery. And that and the fact that the number of fatalities with the drug versus the placebo was also less. Not as much or as dramatically as one would hope. And in fact, that's the aim, is to get it down to, 100% survival rate. But the fact that this can help some people with it, it's believed could be an effective solution. Now, Gilead is gearing up on the idea that it will get this emergency approval, and they are manufacturing or expect to have manufactured 1.5 million doses by the end of May. That's this month, and that would help address 210,000 treatment courses, assuming that most patients are treated for 5 days. So the other piece to this is that Gilead is going to donate the supplies to hospitals and doctors free of charge. There's no word as far as, if that's going to be an ongoing thing or whether it's just for this period of time that they will offer it free of charge. But the fact that they can offer something that would be likely used for those at greatest risk and catching them early on with the disease. So if they can get those patients first, it might improve their recovery outcome. So something very promising. What it seems is happening too is that as companies draw closer to getting approvals or having successful trials, they're already amping up to get the product out there. I just saw that AstraZeneca they've also been working on a vaccine like 69 other companies that we've been hearing about. And they expect to be in trials human trials shortly, but they are already preparing hundreds of thousands of doses to have available. And they say even this year that this can be available, this vaccine. So they still have their regulatory hurdles to clear for this. And as I said, they haven't really even done the testing yet. But the research so far has been very promising, and they feel confident in being able to start mass producing the vaccine to be sent out. So lots going on. As I said, it changes every day. There are new developments. When you have 70 different companies working on the vaccine, and then I'm not sure how many are working on a treatment, but there are a lot, and I'm sure they're working round the clock and quite aggressively to be able to get these ready for approvals. So promising for all of us, and the market seems to be fueled by this, and I suppose that's a good thing, and really is actually probably the secret to saving our economy. So we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Microsoft and how they're doing.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings-on of those worlds? The Gsmc Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The Gsmc Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Hi, I'm back. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about Microsoft. And it's kind of a big transition, actually, from some of the earlier topics when I talked about the GDP, the unemployment figures, the race to the cure, and the market being affected by that. When we're talking about Microsoft, we're talking about a company that seems to be largely immune to the effects of the coronavirus, at least judging by the recent earnings report that they gave on Wednesday, the middle of this week. Microsoft said that sales rose 15% in the first 3 months of the year to $35 billion, and it generated a net profit of $10.75 billion. Now, Microsoft isn't alone. Some of the other tech stocks have been doing really well during this time too, or at least exceeding what expectations were. I think everyone expected that they would take a hit during this time, as most businesses have in some way. But so far, Microsoft and others have been doing pretty well. And actually, this change of culture for us, the working at home, the not being in school, has actually bolstered Microsoft sales a bit. The fact that it has been strongly promoting its Microsoft Teams platform. It's a collaborative software suite that enables video conferencing and chatting. And they've been really promoting that. It's basically a competitor to Zoom and to Google Meet and some of the other similar apps. But it's one that has evidently been doing pretty well. It has 75 million daily active users, which is a pretty significant number. And we're going to talk in a minute about how that compares to Zoom, that has been touting some pretty high numbers that would suggest it's the leader in that field. But it seems that field is closing in pretty well with all the different competitors. Nonetheless, for Microsoft, cloud computing overall has been a big earnings driver for the company, and it has become central for a lot of customers, Microsoft customers, who now find themselves working at home. And that has meant about a 59% jump in sales in their Azure cloud business. So Azure's part of their bigger cloud segment. And altogether in that segment, they booked revenue of $12.3 billion, which is up 21%. Another division which is based on company productivity and some of their programs like LinkedIn, a sales management software, Dynamics, and subscriptions to Office 360. Altogether in that division, they had $11.7 billion in sales, and that's up 15% from the same quarter a year ago. At the same time, their personal computing business, that has also seen an increase of sales of $11 billion as demand has been increased with people working at home. One of the other things that I think is interesting, and I can speak of a little bit from, at least as an outside observer, but is the gaming business, the Xbox sales. The gaming business for Microsoft, Xbox, has increased 2% in this quarter, which is an improvement from the 11% drop in the previous quarter. Now, when I say speak of personal experience, I can't watch my larger TV because my son is playing Xbox on it, and it seems that he's rediscovered all over again the fun in being able to play simultaneously with his friends, Call of Duty and some of the other ones that he plays. I don't know. It's just a lot of shooting and killing, lovely stuff like that, which I don't find a good way to relax at all, but I suppose we all have our thing. After all, he is only 4 years old, so he's got to have his fun. Just kidding. Sorry. I have to inject some kind of humor in this. But, because it's just so graphic and grisly. But it's helping Microsoft and Microsoft shareholders, so I guess that's a good thing. And whatever way that people can unwind and connect with their friends, I guess is a good thing. So in any case, I did mention that I would speak to Zoom for a moment relative to Microsoft, just because of how everyone's come to know Zoom as the big video conferencing tool that many are using right now to do the work and school and meetings with social groups and friends and cocktail parties and all that kind of stuff. Zoom had initially said that they had 300 million daily active users. And that was a number that was being thrown around a lot, especially as the CEO was interviewed everywhere because of this phenomenon. However, it turns out that it's not really that high. 300 million daily active users is really actually 300 daily meeting participants. So that means that, you could be signed into Zoom and have maybe 2 or 3 calls a day that are using Zoom. And so each time that you're using Zoom is counted in that daily meeting participant number, which is 300 million. So by contrast, so we don't really have a number for what their daily active users are, which is almost more like unique visitors, something closer to that. But Microsoft has 75 million daily active users. And by the way, that's a 70% jump in a month from what they had before. So, and actually they do have a number, of daily meeting participants, and their number is 200 million daily meeting participants for Microsoft Teams. Google Meet, by the way, they say that they're adding about 3 million users a day, and overall have 100 million daily meeting participants. And and to be more competitive with some of the others, they have now made it free, the Google Meet. WebEx has about 300 million daily meeting participants. So as I said, there's a number of players in that field, and they're all scrambling to offer new benefits and unique features that the others don't have, including making a free version. So it seems a good space to be competitive in, and we all benefit from that, of course. So we are going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Elon Musk and Tesla.
Hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hi, I'm back. And in this segment, we're talking about Elon Musk and Tesla. And I say it that way because, in a sense, it's two different stories. It's the story about what's going on with outspoken Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, founder of Tesla, and then how Tesla as a company is doing right now. And both are making headlines, considering especially what's happening overall in the automotive industry. Right now, you have the three big auto manufacturers in this country, Ford, GM, Fiat Chrysler. They are all bleeding money by the day, having their factory assembly lines sit idle with all of the upkeep and security and cleaning and all of the things that go into keeping them open. They, as I said, are bleeding money, and some have reported needing to borrow or draw from other sources to be able to cover those expenses. Ford recently announced that it lost $2 billion in the first quarter this year. Volkswagen and Daimler makes the Mercedes-Benz. They also recently reported their earnings took a really big hit in the first quarter this year. Chrysler, I don't have figures on that, but they're supposed to, also be struggling. And GM will be reporting on their earnings sometime in early May, around May 6th or so. So overall, the automotive industry is not doing well. Obviously, all the plants in this country, United States, had to close because of the stay-at-home orders in each state. Didn't necessarily stop Tesla right away. Elon Musk kept his Fremont, California production facility open some days after it was supposed to shut, and he eventually did shut it. He then started to call back workers at another point before getting the go-ahead, and he has since reeled that in. But they have still managed to report earnings so for this year. So Tesla reported first quarter profit, which they say was fueled by their sale of regulatory tax credits and also a strong demand for its Model 3 compact car. Tesla has just the one plant in the United States, which, as I said, is closed right now. But that same plant is the one that manufactures its Model S, X, Y, and Model 3s. So what they have reported is that their first quarter adjusted profit of $1.24 is a share marked the first time in Tesla's 16-year history that it has recorded 3 consecutive quarters of profitability. The result has also defied industry analysts who on average expected an adjusted loss of 28 cents a share. Now, Tesla is saying that they're not sure that their performance in this first quarter is necessarily sustainable or that they're going to see the same results for the second quarter. They're still being conservative in their views on how they're going to do with that. But in the meantime, it hasn't stopped Elon Musk from speaking out about, his doubts about the severity of the coronavirus and the measures that are being taken to enforce staying at home. And he has he's called the stay-at-home orders and the idea about enforcing them. He's called that fascist. He has openly criticized information that's been disseminated about the virus. He's suggested that doctors have inflated case numbers, suggesting that it was for financial reasons. He said that he thinks that all of the fatalities that were reported as coronavirus fatalities in Italy were actually due to other causes. He has also supported and promoted a paper, a study on chloroquine, the benefits of that being used, and which have been debunked by many. In fact, you can't really find that study anymore on it because it's been largely discredited. So he seems like he's been kind of on the wrong side of this argument or on this reality. And it does make you wonder what impact that eventually will have on consumer confidence in the brand, where a lot of companies right now who are, if you want to call it, the right side of recognizing the severity of this pandemic, and who are doing things like offering their products, their vaccines for free or at cost, and companies that are retooling to use their factories, including GM, to make ventilators or personal protective equipment. You see, a lot of companies shifting gears and trying to be responsive and more altruistic at this time. And regardless of their motives, which we're going to assume are good motives, it's got to reflect in consumer loyalty later, I would think. When they get returned back to spending, they're going to remember the companies that were out in the forefront in trying to help and trying to fix the problem, rather than denying it exists or denying it's as bad as the reports say. So it's going to be interesting to see what the second quarter results will be for Tesla, if they will in fact be hurt by what Musk has been saying and doing. The point is, though, that he makes a product that many are loyal to, and has a certain type of prestige about it. And, that may prove to be the stronger factor in the long run. But I guess time will tell on that. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting that the company is doing well. Perhaps maybe a recognition somewhere that the coronavirus is as big as we see, the rest of us see it as, and it will have an impact on your business, is perhaps the reason why they are being somewhat conservative in their feelings about second quarter earnings and beyond. But for now, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Facebook.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The Gsmc America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the Gsmc America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So, Facebook ads, what do they say about us? That's not really what I'm focusing on right now in this segment, but if you do use Facebook, and you probably have found yourself looking at it a little bit more during this time, since we're home and easily have access either to the computer or your smartphone, and it can be sort of a default activity that you go and you check Facebook. And apparently there are a lot of us doing that, and that's part of the reason why Facebook is actually doing okay, kind of like how Microsoft is doing as a result of more people being home and needing their computer or smartphone. So with Facebook, they definitely have benefited from that, particularly when it comes to their ad sales, where it was thought that initially with so many companies not being able to operate or shut down, it might affect ad sales from them. As it turns out, there's a lot of other companies that are able to advertise, like Masterclass. I get that ad a lot. Different artists and renowned people, trying to get you to sign up for their class, and subscriptions to different magazines or New York Times, wine of the month, or get your box of 12 wines delivered to your door, something like that. So we've all gotten them. You've all seen them. And like I said, it seems that those companies, and evidently there are a number of them, that benefit from Facebook presence. So Facebook announced during the middle of the week that its ad sales had stabilized in April, which was a surprise to them, and it drove a 10% gain in the company's shares in after-hours trading. The reduced demand in the first quarter contributed to a significant decline in the cost of ads on the platform. The finance chief had said that the average price of ads purchased declined by 16% in the quarter, which was a drop that was largely attributable to the last weeks of March. Facebook had reported that $17.7 billion in revenue was earned in the first quarter, which is typically its lightest, and that's up from $15 billion a year ago, and it beats the analyst projections of 17.3. So they've done pretty well in this first quarter, which is where we saw the big shift happen with people having to stay at home. The company did report earnings of $4.9 billion, or $1.71 per share, just under the $1.74 per share that analysts expected. And there are some other positive indicators from Facebook as well. They are looking to add at least 10,000 new jobs in engineering and product development in the coming months. And they have also pledged $100 million in grants and advertising credits to small businesses in locations where it has a physical presence, and said that it would spend $100 million supporting local news in addition to other health-related philanthropy. So during this time, they are one of those companies that is reaching out and trying to help the overall fight, particularly where it comes to small business that needs any help that it can get right now, with so many struggling to get loans through the payroll protection program. And by the way, two other companies that have done well in terms of digital advertising are Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and Snap Inc., who owns Snapchat. Both of those had reported pretty strong earnings for the first quarter of this year. And you join that larger tech sector that has been doing well for the most part. I wanted to shift gears for a moment and talk about another company, another kind of company, a subscription-based musical streaming service. And this one is Spotify technology. And it's like Pandora and Apple Music and some of the others that are out there. But Spotify's been around for a little while. It's a Stockholm-based company, and it has ad-paying and ad-supported users as part of its subscription base. And while they have seen an increase in their users, they have seen a decline in ad sales, which is kind of an interesting situation. The reason that I'm bringing them up is that they, like other companies, have had to sort of adjust their model for how they're addressing their consumers, their audience. Like Quibi, that was designed to show short video programs, TV programs to people on the go and watching them on their smartphones. And here they're rolling it out in the middle of, an extraordinary time where most people are at home. They had to sort of adapt expectations and look at other ways to appeal to the audience for that. Well, like that, Spotify is also largely geared to commuters, to people who are going back and forth to work, to school, to other places where they would listen to a playlist that they created or one that's generated for them. And they have seen that because of the pandemic and sheltering in place, that there has been a decline in consumption. However, they have 286 million monthly active users and 130 million paying subscribers. And they feel that their subscriptions have improved compared to a year earlier, the company had said, despite some impact from the effect of the pandemic. And they said that there was a modest increase in cancellations and payment failures because of that. As I said, they have a free version, which is largely ad-supported, and then a subscription service, a paid subscription service. In a letter recently to investors, the company noted that its use for service in cars, on wearable devices, and on the web declined, while its audience through television and video game consoles grew by more than 50%. Spotify had said that its data indicate morning routines have changed with fewer people commuting to work. So it would seem that those users who are being introduced to Spotify right now, stand a good chance of converting to paid subscribers later when, business is back to whatever usual or normal is. And then hopefully for their sake too, ad revenues will come back as well. So we are ready for another break. And in the final segment of the show, I just want to touch on the movie industry a little bit, particularly something that came out with AMC Theaters recently. And we'll talk about that in a moment.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the Gsmc Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Soundcloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type Gsmc in the search bar.
Hi, I'm back again, and as I said, this is our final segment of today's podcast, and I just got to say that one of the biggest things that I miss about being in this lockdown is being able to go to the movies. There's just nothing like it. It's a good excuse to get out of the house. It's something where you don't really have to work hard at it. You just sit and take it in, get a different venue, get to be among others who are watching the movie, presumably for the first time like you, and get to maybe hear their reactions to it. There's just a lot about the dynamics about being in a movie theater that I miss. I mean, yeah, you can see it at home, and that's great. It has its appeals too, but I guess that's one of the things that I probably will be, towards the top of my list to do when I get out of lockdown. Universal Pictures, as many of you know, had released Trolls directly to stream on TV. And, was obviously planned for a big theater rollout right smack in the middle of the early days of the coronavirus lockdown. And surprisingly did very well. In fact, Universal recently said that they made more than $100 million in revenue from the movie's release to direct to streaming. Now that included people could purchase it for $19.99 in addition to renting it. So that was in its first 3 weeks of release, and it compares to or contrasts the original Trolls movie, which had just made $16 million in its first 3 weeks, and that was just in theatrical release back in 2016. So obviously they see these results and they're saying, hey, when we're able to get back into theaters, we're going to do that, but we're going to do both. We're going to release to streaming at the same time of releasing to theaters. Well, AMC Theaters, the national chain, I believe it's the biggest theater chain in the country, has basically said, we're taking our ball and going home unless you play with us and only us. And of course, they don't mean just them as a movie franchise, but also as the meaning instead of sharing them with the TV at home. And AMC had said that they would ban from its theaters all future movies released by Comcast-owned Universal. And one of the big ones that's expected out later, whose release was delayed, was Fast and Furious 9, the sequel, or F9. And basically, that would be one of the first movies that they would do both a streaming and a theatrical release. And AMC is saying no. And it just struck me as kind of funny, just because Universal's now found its way to a whole new revenue source. Not that they didn't stream before, but in choosing to go out that way with the initial release was kind of a breakthrough, and in the way that it succeeded for them. So going forward, it only makes sense that they would want to tap into both. And AMC, of course, who's been hurt by the closing of all its theaters and having to remain shuttered until they get the word that people can go back. And there's lots of speculation that when people can go back to the theaters, it's not going to be the same, or at least not for a while. There'll probably be capacity limits to how many can be in a theater. There may be more restrictions around how they sell the concession foods. I'm not really sure what that'll look like, but it's likely going to be different, where you're not going to have a packed theater with every seat sold. So, it makes sense in a way that AMC wants to make sure their holding on to their income. They are saying that they would be willing to sit down with Universal and to talk about, some way that they could do this where they both would make out okay. But at this point, they're saying, hey, don't plan on us releasing your movies or showing your movies unless you guys change your position. Now, Universal came back with a statement that we absolutely believe in the theatrical experience and have made no statement to the contrary. As we stated earlier, going forward, we expect to release future films directly to theaters as well as on premium video on demand when that distribution outlet makes sense. Now, meanwhile, it's not clear what position some of the other large theater chains will take. Regal Entertainment, Cinemark. It's not clear how they will respond to Universal's decision. However, the National Association of Theater Owners has said in their statement that, unfortunately, Universal has a destructive tendency to both announce decisions affecting their exhibitor partners without actually consulting with those partners. Ouch. So it'll be interesting, but, I think that the reality is it's still going to be a while yet before theaters will open. I've heard some projections that maybe it would be July before theaters will open. And hopefully by that point, they will have figured out something that will resolve this for both sides. So that brings us to the end of today's podcast. I want to thank you for joining the GSMC Business News Podcast on the Gsmc Podcast Network. We would really love to have your thoughts or reviews that you could leave on whatever subscription service that you get this podcast. You can also leave comments on our Twitter account or on our Facebook page. So please check us out. Please let us know what you think. And till the next time, have a great night. Take care.
You've been listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, part of the Gsmc Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.